We'll start. What's the last four of your social, and then we'll go from there. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
I'm just
that'll be
I'm just kidding.
BR549. If you were a Hee Haw fan.
Yes, the good Junior Samples reference is always good. The pride of Cumming, Georgia, Junior Samples.
There you go. That's right.
So I was thinking this morning, as I was getting everything set up, thinking about life as getting to play music, and the music part is certainly a great aspect of it, but the relationships and the friendships that are built as a result of getting to play is ultimately, to me, the best part of it. And that statement couldn't be any truer about my feelings about the guy that I'm getting to speak with today. We've known each other a long time. He's one of my musical heroes, but I just love him as a human being and just think the world of him as a person and just an inspiration in every way, and really happy to get to hang out with him. And so I'd like to welcome my pal, Mr. David Ellis, to the podcast. Hey, David.
Hey, Brad. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. Now that I'm gotten all emotional feeling about all that stuff.
Well, I know. I'm sitting here. Let me grab some tissue, bud. My feelings about you are mutual on that. And you nailed it on the head. I mean, when we get into music, I think sometimes like for me, I know when I first started, I had it in my brain I was going to be a rock star, and got into started playing music at an early age, and you start morphing over the years, and then as you start getting into I'm going to say a more mature yes. time of life, you realize it is a whole lot more about the relationships and a whole lot less about the music.
It really is. The older I get, and I guess you start to look at your life from a 30,000-foot view more than you did when you were younger. And yeah, ultimately, it all comes down to the relationships. That is what it's about. And it's that way, it's that way, could be said about everything.
Oh, sure.
But we've gotten to play a lot of great music with a lot of great musicians, for a lot of great people, and just have a whole lot of fun doing it. And whenever we were playing together, it never was stressful. There was never anything but just complete joy. It was amazing.
Exactly. Totally agree.
Yeah, it's great. I feel like we could just end right now and just say, yeah that's good. But no, I want everybody to know everything about you. So we'll start. What's the last four of your social? And then we'll go from there. No, I'm just kidding.
No, that'll be...
I'm just kidding.
BR549. If you were a Hee Haw fan.
Yes, the good Junior Samples reference is always good. The pride of Cumming, Georgia, Junior Samples.
There you go. That's right.
So you and I have known each other. I'm trying to. I don't remember the year that we would have met. We met through our pal, Mr. Steve Ward.
Exactly.
But we were kind of orbiting in the same solar system for a long time, and I think we were even in the same venue playing the same gig with different bands before.
Exactly. You were on one end and we were on the other, or something like that.
And
what's funny is we now live only about 5 minutes from that place.
No kidding.
Yeah,
that is so funny.
I pass it probably three times a month, or 3 times a week rather, going here and there, and just look over and think of, that's where I used to did a gig together.
Yeah, that's so funny. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we played. I think the first time that we played together, I think we did a trio at Montana's one night. If I'm not mistaken, we played inside. We did a trio, and I just remember thinking, "Oh, okay. Well, this is fun. I'm really, really enjoying this a lot."
Yes.
And, the instrumental part of it, the vocal part of it, and it's just people, like-minded people, just trying to, or just having a good time playing music together.
Well, I mean, I think I I remember the gig. I don't remember exactly when that would have been, but I do recall the gig. I agree. And it was almost like the three of us were wanting to serve the song, but at the same time, we were all just clicking as humans, and you've got we got friends sitting out there listening to us and people that we don't even know, and they're getting into it and everything. And it was almost, it's just a very, very cool experience, which every time I've ever played music with you has been a cool experience.
Yeah.
So it's that same scenario all the time.
I feel the same way. And it was that way from the beginning, and it just got better and better. The more we did it, and the more and it was instant chemistry with the three of us playing together. But once we had some repetition under our belt, it just got better and better, and it was so much fun. And I'm saying it in the past tense, not like it's ever going to happen again. It's just life is in a different scenario than it was then. I'm living further away now, but I wouldn't trade anything for those experiences that while we lived in Georgia. It was just the best, man.
Oh, I know. There's a lot of great music here in Atlanta, and a lot of great there's a lot of great musicians. There's a lot of people in this town alone that nobody's ever going to hear of or hear about, other than if you know them right there in that little area.
Yeah.
But I know that's true for any area. It's true for any place on the planet. But it's just so cool, some of the people you get to play with here.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone this week, a musician that plays in Minneapolis, and I was asking him about, what is it about Minneapolis, man, that music scene? And we were talking about it, and then he stopped and he was like, well, what about Atlanta? I mean, look at the music scene in Atlanta. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Atlanta has as good of a music scene of any city in the U.S. or the world, and it's all kinds of music. It's not just this or just that. There are some great players in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, totally agree.
And David Ellis is one of them. So there you go.
I appreciate that.
So I want to get to know David Ellis, youngster, the young man, the formative years, the early David Ellis, from your memoir, soon to be released.
Yes, I'm going to keep a copy of this podcast once it's produced, and then I will go back and write my book, write my memoirs.
Yes, the Banjo Chronicles.
Yes, exactly. I'm gonna write that down. That might be maybe if I start a YouTube channel, then maybe I can call it the Banjo Chronicles.
The Banjo Chronicles with David Ellis, Esquire. I love it. So,
oh gosh.
So tell me about the role of music in your life as early as you can remember it, and what you were hearing, who you were hearing it from, and just what gave you that inspiration that, hey, maybe that's something I want to do.
Yeah. Well, I think if I go back, like when I was like elementary school, middle school, junior high, I was attempting to formulate myself as a little bit of an athlete, just playing rec ball, but had not gotten into trying to play school ball or anything. But
what were you playing?
Like football and baseball.
Okay.
And it was, just recreational league stuff and everything,
mm-hmm.
and trying to decide if I wanted to pursue something like that. And then it's funny when I talk about it now, but like around 12 or 13, I was thinking I wanted to get into bodybuilding. So I started like digging into all that. So I'm trying to put that together with being, trying to play baseball and football and trying to think of, I need to take care of my body, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But then during that same time frame, over those probably 5 to 7 years that I can recollect leading up to age 14, when I started playing, my mom and dad always had some sort of music play. So my dad has always been a fan of like old gospel, old hymns, and old classic country music.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom, being raised as she was also a fan of that, but she was also a little bit of a rocker. So we were also listening to like early, like Beatles and like early days of Eagles and Chicago and even even prior to Chicago Transit Authority. I mean, like the early days of that music, along with countless, what you call it, songwriter, people. Like we just had a vast array of music. But the other thing that my dad specifically liked to do was watch Grand Ole Opry on the week. Like I think it was like a Saturday night show or whatever, and it was Grand Ole Opry and it was Hee Haw.
Yep.
So in between those, you got a full dosage of good country music and a good dosage of good gospel music. And then there were, like, if it was a Grand Ole Opry show, you started getting a little bit of edginess, a little bit of country rock and some of that thrown in as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw old clips of Stringbean playing banjo. And then, of course, during those days, Grandpa Jones was still around. So I would see the Grandpa Jones and Ramona, his wife, doing their show on the Grand Ole Opry. And then you had all of these, you had Conway Twitty and George Jones and all of these people. But there was something about banjo. I was just like, that really that's really cool. But what's interesting is, as much as I was drawn to that, when I decided I wanted to play an instrument, Dad had a guitar, and I would pick the thing up and kind of plunk around on it, but I knew nothing about what I was doing, had literally no clue. And Dad, I can even still remember Dad's looking at me one day, and I'm sitting there kind of messing around, and he just said, I don't remember the words verbatim, but basically, you need some structure. You're just kind of plunking around. You don't really know what you're doing. We need to get you a guitar, and you need to get some lessons or something. So that was the paraphrase of what he told me. So he took me into town in Stockbridge to reel music, and the music store was upstairs, and the studio was downstairs. Iconic studio for me, and still is. They've revamped it and everything in another location. But we walked in, and the thought process was, because I was also listening to like ZZ Top and Leonard Skinner, Allman Brothers, and I got it in my brain I was going to be a rock star. So Dad takes me to get my guitar, and we walk in, we're looking at guitars, and there's a lady over giving a guitar lesson over in the corner of the room named Arlene Lively. And I'm piddling around with the guitars and plucking around, and she comes over and she says, I want you to sit down for a minute. You need to learn how to play the banjo. And she puts the banjo in my lap, and she said, I'll get you set up in a little bit. We're going to talk. And then she goes back over and finishes up the guitar lesson. And she comes over, and my brain went from being a rock star to, after I heard that banjo and I'm sitting there with it, and then she put some picks on my fingers and kind of got me plucking around on it a little bit. She was like, you need to learn how to play this. This is a popular instrument, and it's going to get more popular. So by the time it was all said and done, we got a banjo, and I started lessons the very next week with her, and took lessons for, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 months. It wasn't a very long time. And then there was a guy in town named Jim Adkins, and Arlene knew Jimmy, and she told me one day, she said, okay, today needs to be your last lesson, but I've got you set up to take lessons from Jim Adkins. And she's talking to my dad and everything. And I think it was like the following week or maybe 2 weeks later, I started lessons with Jimmy. And Jimmy was a really well-known, very versed banjo player, but he started me taking lessons, and I don't remember how long I took. It was maybe 6 months or something, but I took lessons from him. He'd write all these crazy chromatic and melodic things for me to do, and I would just go home, and during that time, I was practicing. Like, I'd get up and practice before school, go to school, come back home, do homework, start practicing again, practice till dinner time, practice till bedtime. So I was practicing some days, maybe 5 and 6 hours. I mean, it was just crazy. And I'd come back the next week, and Jimmy'd say, okay, well, you got this down. And I would literally play straight through it. And he's like, okay, well, we'll do something else. And he just kept building me and building me and building me. And then one day he said, you know what? You got this. You just need to go learn some more stuff. So, like I said, I don't remember, it was 6 months or something like that. And I stopped taking lessons and just kind of started moving on from there.
That is awesome for a multitude of reasons. First of all, there's something incredible about good music teachers that I'm thinking about to the, what did you say her name was?
Arlene Lively.
Arlene Lively. That she saw something in you that you may not have even seen in yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And she kind of shepherded you to start that, maybe stretch out in something you weren't even thinking you were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fact that when she realized that you had reached the limit of what she could show you and was humble enough to say you need to go to the next level, and then moved you to somebody else.
Exactly.
That's awesome. And obviously she was right, because you were bit by the bug, man. You realized that that's what you wanted to do. That's so cool.
Oh, I know. And it was, for me, I remember it being a bit of a shock, because I genuinely, when I walked in that music store, I just wanted to get a cool guitar and just go be a rock star, even if it wasn't full time. I just wanted that. That's what I want. And it just was not, that was not what was supposed to happen. I was have the banjo, man.
That's
be the banjo rock star.
By the way, I have updated the title of your memoir to the Bodybuilding Banjo Chronicles. I meant to tell you that.
I'll take that under advisement.
Yeah. Just pencil that in at the top. Were you doing? Was it Scruggs style right out of the gate, or did you do any clawhammer stuff? What?
No, it's. I was, when Arlene started teaching me, she taught me straight Scruggs style, and what was interesting was I jumped right in. I mean, I totally, something about the way my brain works. I totally understood the structure of the roll patterns, and I have still to this day, after 40 whatever plus years of playing, I still am not very versed on all the musicality, all the little music-ease and things, all the fine notes of everything that you need to say about tempo and rhythm and whatever. But I always understood exactly what was going on with playing Scruggs style. Then when I got to Jim Atkins, Jim, of course, plays Scruggs style. Jim had an opportunity to play with Earl probably 3 or 4 times before he passed away. And but Jimmy was playing a lot of melodic and chromatic music, and he sat down and started showing me how playing a note on one string corresponded to a higher string or a lower string with the exact same note, and where you could find those patterns. And he started teaching me that kind of stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, you can do all kind of crazy stuff with this instrument.
Yeah, it is such an amazing instrument. And I think, there have been a lot of people that have the banjo has always been present in music, obviously bluegrass music, but I think, people like Bela Fleck, John Hartford, Tony Trischka, all these people that bringing it to the mainstream, I'm glad to see. And, we've always kind of had this inside joke about the banjo,
Yes.
giving you grief about the banjo, but it's an incredibly cool instrument that just changes the whole sound of a group. It's amazing. Yeah.
And I think in recent years, maybe the last, say, 10 years, might be a little bit more or something like that, with groups that have hit mainstream like Mumford and Sons and Old Crow Medicine Show and those style bands utilizing banjo. But what's cool is if you go back to the early days of bands like The Who, Pete Townsend played banjo.
That's right. Yeah.
And then and then getting away from banjo for a minute, like Led Zeppelin was using mandolin, and so there's those instruments were in a lot of music that we associate either as straight rock or even like early days of country and stuff like that. A lot of those instruments were in that music. Sometimes they weren't prominent as a lead instrument, but they were definitely in the foundation of the rhythm and what was going on.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And for folks that are listening that may not have been lucky enough yet to hear you, you are a multi-instrumentalist. Sometimes it's called a utility player, right? Because you kind of a Swiss Army knife of instruments on a gig, and I'm just thinking when we would play, you would bring a banjo, a mandolin, a fiddle, a dobro, acoustic guitar, an electric guitar sometimes. just really kind of, it's like bringing a bag full of different paintbrushes to a
Well,
thing,
I'm glad you said that because I've always referred to myself as the color crayon.
Hmm.
So you can draw your picture and everything, and then I'm going to come in there. I'm going to throw some yellow and a little bit of blue, a little bit of red, and whatever is needed to brighten
Yeah.
that picture up. But I'm not the picture. I'm just the little color crayon.
Well, I wish, we need to get you a Bob Ross wig to go with this. Because I think that would just set the whole thing. Just,
Yes, and
yes, happy
and
little
put
clouds with David.
some happy little exactly some happy little clouds over here and a happy little bird. Oh my gosh!
When you were talking about Stringbean earlier, it reminded me of us playing that. We played a wedding. I think it was a
Yes,
wedding in Tennessee outside of Nashville, and it was on the property of Stringbean's house where he was murdered.
exactly. I know it. I still think about that every now and then. I think about that, and I think about if you remember, we were playing. We did the full complement. Shaky Jane, the girl who was getting married, and was joking and said, "Okay, do you have anything special in your rider?" And I said, and I made a joke, and I said, "Yeah, we need little 4-inch mason jars." With our band name on M&Ms and they have to be certain colors or whatever. And I left it at that. And it was just a joke. And then we show up and they've got 4-inch mason jars with M&Ms with our band name on it.
Green M&Ms with the band with
Yes.
Shaky Jane. I still
Shaky.
have that somewhere. Yeah, I couldn't believe. Yeah, it was like this funny little joke that she took it and ran with it. Yeah, it was
Yes.
crazy. That is so
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, that girl is. I don't know if she's still there or not, but she was like a production girl for like the main producer for WWE wrestling.
I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's
And there were
funny.
a bunch of people at her wedding were wrestlers.
Wow, I did not realize that. I think I was so enamored with the fact that we were playing next to Stringbean's house with Grandpa Jones' house in front of it that I didn't even
Exactly.
realize all that was going on.
I
That's
know.
crazy.
Yeah.
So you're starting with the banjo. You've been totally sucked into the music world with it. When did all these other instruments get into your life?
Well, banjo and guitar. I mean, I did. Like I told you earlier. Dad had a guitar, and I plunked around on it. But when I started playing banjo, Arlene showed me that the similarity. You've got second, third, and fourth string of a banjo, and second, third, and fourth string of a guitar are the same as long as you're doing standard tunings. And I would play and play and play. I might be playing banjo for an hour and a half or so, and then I would grab up guitar and say, "Okay, I wonder if I can do what I did on banjo. I wonder if I can do that on guitar." And I'd start plunking around and try to find different note patterns or chord patterns that I could mimic on both instruments. And that's kind of where that started. But then, of course, being raised, as you're being taught banjo, everybody's going to teach you from a bluegrass perspective. So you start listening to old Bill Monroe, Ralph Stanley, Don Reno, Red Smiley, all that sort of stuff, and then you're getting into Tony. You start the early Tony Rice and early David Grisman, like the early David Grisman album where it's nothing but bluegrass tunes. And they are playing some of those tunes so lightning fast, and the production quality was awful because it was a live performance. But you start listening to that stuff, and then you start hearing like fiddle players and mandolin players doing these crazy leads. And like I said, when I was taking lessons from Jim Adkins, he's doing all this melodic stuff, which is supposed to mimic like a fiddle tune or something, where it's very melodic. It's not, just the thing about Scruggs style playing, even though you hear the melody, there's a lot of implied melody as well. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of filler notes. So when you start playing melodic banjo and chromatic banjo, you're hearing all of the note patterns, and you kind of start hearing that in those early recordings. And I mean, it's not only true for early recordings, but back then, that's what I was listening to. And so then people like Dan Crary, who was an amazing flat picking guitar player, John Hickman on banjo, Byron Berline. So they had a trio, and that was one of my favorite albums to listen to, the Berline, Hickman, and Prairie album. And they're playing all these cool old fiddle tunes. I don't even remember what the tunes were on the album. I'm sure I've got it still somewhere in the album collection. But you start listening to that stuff, and you're like, okay, I wonder if I can pick that out. And it started growing, but then at the same time, I'm like, okay, I go to a bluegrass festival, and I've got my banjo, and I've got my guitar, and I walk up, and there's 7 banjos in the jam session, and there's 14 guitars. So I'm like, I'm never even going to get a chance to play unless I want to wait 20 minutes to take a break. So I'm like, I need to learn some other stuff. So then I pick up mandolin and start learning how to do, Bill Monroe, who created bluegrass music, that was his instrument of choice. So I start learning how to play mandolin. Well, then the more you talk to musicians, you realize, okay, well, I'm playing mandolin, but you're playing fiddle, and we're doing a lot of the same fingerings. And you start talking to fiddle player. Well, yeah, our tuning is the same. So anything I'm doing, you're doing the same thing. Our fingers are ever so slightly offset because you're playing a fretted instrument, and as a fiddle player, I'm playing a non-fretted instrument. So I'm playing directly on the note, whereas you as a mandolin player are playing ever so slightly behind the note so it can depress onto the fret. So I start looking at that, and my brother at the time kind of wanted to learn. He was wanting to learn how to play an instrument, so Mom and Dad got him a violin. And that was short-lived for him, but I dug right into it and started learning how to play fiddle as well. So within like a 2 to maybe 2.5 year span, I went from playing guitar or banjo and guitar, and then probably within a year or so, I've got mandolin that I've started playing and fiddle. And then Mom and Dad decide, okay, well, we need to do something. Like Dad says, hey, I want to learn how to play rhythm guitar. So during this same time frame, Dad's picked him up another guitar, and Mom wants to. Well, I think Dad wanted her to play, but maybe she wanted to play. I don't remember what the conversations were at the time. But Dad gets her an upright bass. Well, she had no clue what to do, nor did Dad. So me listening to hundreds and hundreds of hours of recordings, I've started picking up where the bass line is, and of course, bluegrass bass. not that it's any less difficult at times to play, but bluegrass bass, obviously you being a bass player know, the approach for playing bluegrass bass is much different than standard R&B or a standard rock or something like that. And so I'm like, okay, let me figure this thing out. So I sit down, I start shifting from practicing hours and hours on banjo. I start spreading it out a little bit, and I'm playing a little bit on mandolin, a little bit on fiddle, and now I've picked up bass at age 15, and I'm 16, and I'm learning how to play the bass line and just playing along with albums. The cool thing about playing with albums and now current day CDs, or not even current CDs, but live streaming or iTunes and stuff like that. The cool thing about it is the band never changes, so
That's right.
you have to learn how to be on point. So my bass playing at the time was, of course, straight bluegrass or bluegrass gospel or old hymns or old classic country. So I learned in a very short period of time what my mom needs to be able to do. And then I get her downstairs and I'm like, okay, we're going to learn how to play the bass. And I start teaching her how to do 1, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3. And I'm just doing that basic bluegrass bass playing. And so I've now got banjo, guitar, mandolin, fiddle, and bass. And that was pretty much exclusive. That's all I worked on for a long time. But what was funny, back to the bass for a minute, is so I've got Mom learning how to play like Flat and Scruggs, Cabin in Caroline or whatever, just straight G, C, and D. Well, then I got the bug after hearing, Newgrass Revival and the old Bluegrass Alliance and some of those bands who were doing really progressive stuff. And I was like, okay, I can still be a rock star. I go back to, when I pick it up and before I even picked up banjo thinking I want to be a rock star, well, I'm listening to all this stuff and it's like listening to a rock band, but they're playing bluegrass instruments. So Then I start teaching, I'm listening to the bass line and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how can I get my mom, who knows nothing about music, but has learned how to, she always had great, she doesn't play anymore today, but she always had great timing. So all I had to do was teach her what to do, and she nailed it every time. But then when I started playing around with Newgrass Revival stuff, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really complex. And I'm listening to John Cowan play, and I'm trying to figure out those bass lines. And then I'm like, okay, Mom, we need to learn how to do this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, John Cowan was he and Sam Bush were as influenced by Lennon and McCartney as they were by Ralph Stanley.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
totally. And I think I think that's one of the reasons that when you're learning how to play something, you approach it from I guess maybe the socially accepted sound. But then if you start listening to songs and say, let's think about that from a different perspective. What happens if and I think this kind of goes back to what you mentioned earlier, like when we first started playing and I'm bringing 5 instruments. We start playing a song and then Steve would pop into another tune and maybe I've got mandolin in my hand, but as a traditional recording, there wouldn't have been mandolin on the song or something. But I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm in this key, I'll just play this. And it just kind of morphed into that whole thing of approaching a song and, taking your influences, whether they be the Beatles or whether they be the Eagles or whether they be Ralph Stanley or Bill Monroe or Bela Fleck or whoever it was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really it. And look, a couple things I've taken away from this. Number one is that you obviously, I mean, I know you've had a successful teaching studio for a very long time.
Right.
And obviously that started very early on, your ability to, it's one thing to be able to play, but it's a whole other thing to be able to communicate that information to someone in a way that they will understand then how to do it. Right. Music instruction it requires a certain level of the hard skills on it and the soft skills of the communication to be able to do it. And obviously you were doing that very early on, which is amazing. And secondly, as you're picking up these instruments, I'm assuming you didn't think of this at the time, but man, how employable were you making yourself? Like, it's one thing to be able to play one instrument and get hired to go and do it. But if you're a banjo player, you'll get hired for some gigs on banjo. But if you're a fiddle player, you could get hired by a country band to go just play fiddle. Or you get hired by this band to go play 3 or 4 instruments. I mean, you were setting yourself up for success by being able to play all these different instruments and bring a lot more to the table than maybe someone that only plays one instrument.
Right. And I mean, I'm so blessed too. I mean, because I that's the old the joke of not being the sharpest tool in the box. I mean, I don't ever profess to be the sharpest tool in the box, but that has definitely been a great blessing to be able to understand all those instruments and be able to apply them to pretty much any form of music.
Yeah, well, you do it really, really well. And I mean, you're one of the busiest musicians I know. So obviously people have figured out that this guy is going to show up, he's going to be prepared, he's going to play well, and he's just going to be easy to work with, man. And I know that's why you've consistently been working as many years as you have. So, really awesome.
It's definitely been pretty amazing.
One of the things too that is cool about you playing at home, it's one thing to practice in your bedroom, but there's this whole other thing when you start playing with other human beings. There's learning how to play an instrument, and then there's learning to play that instrument with somebody else, right? And because there's this whole other piece of it that you have to meld those together, and I don't want to overstate that, but it's a pretty big deal, right? There are musicians that are very good at playing by themselves that may not be as good when they play with other people. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Sure, totally agree. I've got a longtime friend of mine, Steve Stanley, who I met through a music store I used to go to and do jam sessions and stuff. And I remember Steve distinctly one day. This young kid was in the music store, and he was maybe 14 or 15, might not even been quite that old. And he picked up an electric guitar, and he was sitting there literally shredding. I mean, it sounded like Malmsteen or somebody. I mean, it was just really but it was all scales. All it was him going, but he was ripping it. He was one end of the neck to the other. And Steve looked at him and said, "Man, that sounds amazing. Now, can you play a song too?" And the little kid, I mean, it was like you sucked. It was like you took his balloon and went, "Nope, I'm going to take this sharp needle and go." But he had a point. The kid is probably, he might be touring all over the world now doing something. I don't know. He was truly amazing, but he was just playing in his little world, and being able to actually play along with people. I think he probably was a good ways away from being able to do that.
Yeah, that's it. And it's one thing to be a technician, and it's other to be a musician. You know, there's
Well,
two
exactly.
different things.
It's two totally different things, and that's one of the things that I thankfully I accepted a long time ago. I mean, I would love to be the perfect musician that never makes a mistake, or literally always has the perfect sound or whatever. But I wound up being the guy that can bring those instruments, and I can function at a similar level on all of them and be able to contribute to the song in a way that nobody's sitting, because every now and then you'll come across somebody and be like, okay, this guy's a guitar player, but he picked up this mandolin and he's basically just strumming out he's not even really playing the instrument. He's just trying to create that sound. And that one song that he plays it on, that's probably all he ever practices. And I'm not knocking that. I mean, that's, if he's an artist, he's trying to create that sound, but it's a different thought process than being able to say, okay, if I've got banjo in my hand, or I've got mandolin in my hand, I've got fiddle in my hand, I've got guitar, dobro, whatever it is, then I can contribute rhythmically and melodically in a very consistent fashion. And because of that, the old adage of jack of all trades, master of none, I am not ever going to be, if I continue on the trajectory that I've been on for 40 years, I'm not ever going to be a master at any of those instruments, a true master. I'm not going to be able to say, yeah, play Andre Segovia's blah, 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 or play, Stevie Ray Vaughan's blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to be able to do any of that unless I focus only on that. But the upside is some of these bands, or some bands that get put together for a long-term basis, you're able to create a bunch of different sound within the band set of the band. So this song, we're going to have it be heavy mandolin, but then 2 songs later, you're now heavy on dobro sound, or heavy on, fiddle sound, or whatever it is. So the band begins to have a reputation of, hey man, you can hear this and this and this and this, rather than everything being pigeonholed into one specific sound.
Yeah, when the first time I heard you play was you were playing with Steve Ward and Felton. Mm-hmm. And I remember just thinking to myself that having you in a band allows the group to have a whole new set of possibilities of material that they can do. That
right.
And it crosses all styles. You can do the singer-songwriter thing, you can do the country thing, you can do the rock thing, you can do the bluegrass thing, and it's just so much more accessible having that wide palette of sounds.
Right.
That being the ultimate realist does.
I think from one perspective, I've like if you and I'm as much as music as I have listened to, I'm not as versed on, I've heard you over the years, you and Steve talking about iconic albums and like who the producer was and who played drums on this particular cut and all that kind of stuff. I never got into that part of it. I was always about the sounds. And the thing that I've tried to do is learn how to play almost like, when you hear an iconic song or an iconic full production of an album, you hear that from the producer's perspective saying, hey, why don't we try something cool with the song? Why don't we try something cool with this song? Knowing that when the band goes on tour, they may not have all of those instruments, but for the purpose of this production, you've got, hey, we're taking this song and, hey, let's put 3 layers of banjo, mandolin, fiddle, or it might not even have anything to do with bluegrass instruments. Hey, let's put a little pedal steel guitar in here, or let's put a piano riff in here, but yet when the band goes out, they don't have a piano or they don't have a pedal steel or whatever. So I've always tried to play the songs from the perspective of if you're listening to the song being on a recording, hey, I'm going to throw a mandolin line in there, or I'm going to throw this cool dobro line, and it becomes a production on the fly, basically.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that's a good way to think of it, of, approaching the part not from the instrumentalist chair, but the producer standing behind the console and saying, I'm going to approach this as a music listener instead of a music player. And I think
Right.
that changes the whole possibility of what you're going for. That's a great way to think of it.
I mean, like I was saying earlier, I was like really heavily from the rock standpoint. Other than the things like Eagles and Chicago and stuff, I was like really into Allman Brothers and Outlaws and ZZ Top and Molly Hatchet. And Molly Hatchet, for instance, guitar heavy band. Love, but you weren't going to hear a production of Molly Hatchet ever where there was a fiddle player or a pedal steel guitar player or whatever. It was literally going to always be bass drums, 3 guitars, lead vocals, and it was just that was the sound, and that was the sound they were going for, and they didn't want anything else, and that's totally cool. But when you play multiple instruments, your idea is, okay, I need to contribute what's good for the song, not necessarily we only want this sound in this band.
And I remember that one of the things I always enjoyed when the three of us would play is, there were certain songs that you would typically play on the dobro or certain songs that you would typically play on mandolin. But it was also fun some nights when you were holding one instrument and we would do that song. Instead of going to the typical instrument, you would just keep that one on. And it was like this whole new sonic thing happened where it's like, okay, normally he's playing this melodic thing on dobro, but the mandolin gives it this really cool, chunky backbeat kind of thing, like we've got a drum kit up here with us. And it just changes the whole complexion of the song. It's really fun.
It does. I mean, I don't think I even realized, I mean, I'd been playing years before I realized that was possible, but also I didn't realize how much it changed the whole concept of a song. So when you go back and listen to something like maybe Tom Petty doing Learning to Fly and you hear the full band production, but then maybe you come across an old clip of, maybe him sitting around in a living room with the band and he's just hammering it out very songwriterish style or something like that. It's a completely different sound.
Yeah, that's it. It's a completely different sound.
Think about, okay, you being a bass player, and I know that you play primarily electric, but and everything. But it's just like, I mean, you sing these recordings of vocalists standing there with an upright bass, and it's literally vocal and bass. But when you heard the produced version, it was either a full orchestra or it was a jazz combo or whatever it was.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I don't know if you've heard Scott Mulvihill. I don't know if you've heard him. He's a young guy. He toured with Ricky Skaggs for a while as his bass player, but he has done a solo album, and he does a lot of stuff where it's just him singing with an upright bass. He just stands there and sings, and the song is good, and you don't miss the other stuff, right? I mean, it has this whole other amazing thing that can happen because the source material is always good, so it doesn't matter.
Well, and think about it also from this perspective. I mean, as much as I love doing big band stuff, the more people in the band, the less everybody has to play for the most part. I mean, you as a bass player, you're always on, drummer's always on, but all the accessory instruments, you learn how to play a whole lot less. And when you play, you learn how to do something really interesting if possible. But imagine the fact, you've got a vocalist and a bassist, or a vocalist playing bass and singing. You have no other distraction. That's right. You can literally zero in on the bass groove, note patterns and stuff, and you can zero in on the vocal, the actual vocal and the message of the song. And you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know this was the line, because I'm always used to hearing the saxophone jump in right when he starts to sing this line. But when you hear it stripped down, you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
So what were some of the first bands that you started playing in after you felt comfortable, on the instruments to go out and play in front of people? Who did you start playing with?
Well, my very first band was a band called Fast Train. It was a bluegrass band, and the lead singer was a guy named Jimmy Rutherford. He worked with my dad at Ford Motor Company. My dad worked for Ford for just under 42 years, and that was a great career and everything. And Jimmy was a guy that worked with. I don't think they worked directly together, but they knew each other. And Jimmy kind of came from a background, like he played in rock bands in underground Atlanta and stuff like that. But so it was me and him. I actually joined that band, and it was only a short-lived thing. They had Jimmy on guitar and lead vocals, had Linwood Lynch on banjo, and his wife Bobby on upright bass, and Tommy Nations on mandolin. And they decided they wanted to add fiddle. So I was versed enough on fiddle that I could play most any bluegrass tune at that point. That's all they were doing. So started that, and I don't remember what the reason was, but a very short time later, the band had to break up, and then that kind of led the way to Jimmy kind of suggested, because by this time, my mom and dad, I told you I was, teaching, helping dad get started on the rhythm guitar and mom on upright bass. And through some sort of conversation, it became, well, we ought to try putting together a band. So Jimmy, having all of the band knowledge and everything, started, he would come over to mom and dad, to our house, and me and mom and dad and Jimmy would start learning all these songs. So that became the band Windy Creek. And so that was my official second band. Now I'm saying that as the bluegrass stuff, but honestly, my other first band was a band called Hangin' Judge, and that was with my best friend in the world, Scott Gilbert. He was playing bass and I was playing guitar, and I hate it, but I can't remember what the guy's name was. A trio. I can't remember what the guy's name was that played drums with us, and it was another one of those short-lived bands that I don't even remember. I think we did officially maybe 2 or 3 gigs, and then for whatever reason, but that was also kind of in those first bands, because I was determined to be a rock star. I was going to figure out a way of doing that. So had those bands, and that was the official bands. Those were like the first 2 or 3 bands, and then that kind of puts me at somewhere in the neighborhood of age 16, I'm guessing between 16 and 17. And I got hired by a band that was made up of Eastern Airline employees, and they needed somebody to play banjo and rhythm guitar. And they had a full complement. I mean, they had it was a country rock band, and they had bass, drums, pedal steel, piano. Had a girl playing fiddle. I did banjo and rhythm guitar, and then they had lead guitar player. I mean, and then actually one of the guys played horn. I remember trumpet or saxophone or something like that. And then they had 2 girl background vocals. I mean, so it was like like 7-8 piece band. And what the deal was we did do a couple of bar gigs. Like I said, I'm just about to turn 17, or maybe right at 17, somewhere in that neighborhood. They did do a couple of bar gigs, but the main focus of the band was, Eastern was going through a kind of this was one of their rough times, and this ultimately was leading up to the end of the company, I think. But they were trying to like build morale and stuff like that, which I think was really cool. But they basically, my understanding was, they put this band together, and they would send us out to terminals, and we would set up a band in the terminal, and just like as passengers are getting off the planes or getting on the planes, and employees are there and everything, just playing music and just do it. And it's funny because I remember doing that, and I'm sure other airports do it, but if you're in Atlanta, when you walk through the concourse, right there in that middle part, you got people like our good friend Bill Hatcher,
yeah,
or whoever.
Tommy Dodd used to do it.
I mean, just sitting there playing music, just trying to ease the tension of, you got somebody just got off a plane and they had, turbulence, or the person sitting next to them was asleep on their shoulder for 4 hours, or whatever the reason was that they were agitated, or they were anxiety ridden because they're getting ready to get on a plane and they don't like to fly, or whatever the scenario was. But that music, you're coming in there, hey, we're happy to go lucky, we're getting ready to fly to Italy, or whatever we're doing, and you got all this music playing. Well, that was a similar thing that they were trying to do with Eastern. They were trying to create some sort of environment where when you were coming through an Eastern concourse, we had lots of fun going on. And, so we went to Louisville, Kentucky, we went to Miami, we went to Kansas City. I mean, Kansas City trip was in a major snowstorm. And I don't even remember how long it took to actually wind up being able to land. And then once we landed, it was like unload, put us on a bus, and the hotel was a mile from the airport, but I think it took us 3 hours to get there or something. It was just ridiculous. But that was the kind of, I was doing that kind of stuff as, in those early 2 or 3, years right after I started playing. And then I had to join the adulthood and actually get a job.
It happens.
Yeah, I know. I did attempt college for just like 5 semesters back when Clayton State was actually a junior college, and attempted that, and that just was not for me. So, went ahead and moved into a corporate job and only played music at the house for years. I would try to keep it up. I'd be wiped out and I'd just sit down, with a guitar or banjo or mandolin or whatever, and just try to play a little bit to decompress. But went for several years, I don't remember how many, and really only played at the house. Every once in a while, I might get a chance to go play somewhere. But then I started a job at a local trucking company in McDonough, Bennett Motor Express, and a friend of mine who I wound up playing in a band with was he was a bass player, but he was a sales guy, and he got me into the company, helped me get in the company between him and another family member that used to work there. And all of a sudden, there were musicians that wanted to play, and they were like calling me, hey, I'm like, well, hey, I've got a daytime job. Maybe I can start playing. And I kind of jumped back into playing a little bit, played maybe like one night a week or something. Went from there. And I mean, I'm fortunate. I mean, it's not a bragging thing. I'm just fortunate. I could list you a name of probably 30 bands that I've had a chance to play with over the years, just during a, 5 to 10 year span, right? Once I started back playing, it was really cool.
That's great. And I'm, look, I understand that. I certainly understand that struggle of working a full-time job and feeling like you have another full-time job playing music. It's exhausting. And I felt like every time I was at home, I felt like I was either trying to catch up on everything that I had dropped while I was gone, or I was preparing for the thing I was about to have to go and do. And exactly. it's just a hard thing to sustain. It's really tough.
Well, it is, and it's you once you make the commitment, if you're the type person that tries to keep their commitment, then you figure out a way of doing it. Because I remember during that same time frame, I am pretty active in church. I'm singing, this is kind of that during that same time frame of starting at that trucking company at Bennett, and I'm in church choir. I'm singing in a gospel quartet. I'm a part of a men's ministry. And then we lost our our music director, and the church needed an interim worship leader while the search committee, was trying to find who the next person was. So like for 6 months during that same time, I am also the worship leader on Sunday morning. So I'm doing a gig on Saturday night, getting home at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, getting 3 hours of sleep, hopping back up, and a lot of times trying to learn the songs that morning before I go to church, because I had not because I'm still working a full-time job. So I same thing I've watched you do over the years.
I could have literally say everything that you just said, because I lived that life for a very long time, and it's exhausting. And thank goodness you and I were both blessed to have a loving and understanding partner in our life.
Exactly.
That was way more patient than we probably deserved in that aspect, right?
Way more patient than we deserve, way more patient than I think either one of us realized.
That's very well said. I agree.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree.
and I think I have in recent years, as I've gotten older, but in recent years, and watching some of the stuff that I know I missed during those years, that's when you start looking back and saying, "Wow, she really put up with a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
she really did."
yeah,
And the kids too.
The kids too. That's exactly what I was about to say. The kids too, because I know, and whether Lisa would admit it or not, there were probably a lot of times where she probably felt like a single mom,
Mm-hmm.
going and doing errands or going to a rehearsal or to a Skylar's baseball practice or something, and because I was having to go load in for a wedding that I was playing that night, and
Exactly.
it's not a sacrifice that we get to go and have fun and hang out with our buddies while they're like at home picking up all the pieces, keeping the ship afloat while we're gone,
Exactly. Well, if you go back to Michael Bublé's got his song "Home,"
Mm-hmm.
and if you start listening to the lyrics, he's talking about how fun his life is, and you're hanging out at the house, and it was your decision not to jump on this with me, but you're there for me when I get back home. But I'm the one that's jet setting around the world or locally or wherever, and I'm getting to do all this cool stuff and stay in a high-rise hotel and blah, blah, blah. And you don't see it you see it from your perspective, what you're getting to do. You don't until you pull back and start realizing I am missing out on a lot, and I'm also putting this other person through some form of hell because they're not getting to experience life with you.
Yeah, that's really it. That's it. And I do miss playing. Look, that was one of the catalysts for what you and I are doing right now, because I miss the connection with my friends. That was the best part of going and playing music. But all that said, I love being a more present partner now than I used to be. And
exactly.
that's the benefits from that are worth the sacrifice of not playing like I used to and working a full-time job.
Right.
So, yeah, I get
it. And that's one of the things I'm still because I know you've got your regular day job. So my regular day job is teaching and then playing, and so I still struggle. My first go-to, because I want to make sure that I'm contributing financially and everything, is my first go-to is, yes, I will do the gig. But then I have started actively trying to sit down more and say, okay, we need to talk about schedules. Is this going to affect us as the family schedule? Is it something that you work with or something, and start trying to maybe cherry pick a little bit more than what I used to? Because I can remember back when you and I played together, and before that, and then even after that in other bands, I can remember, hey, are you available? Yes, I'm available. I mean, not even thinking twice about it. I'd look at the calendar, and if it was open, I was yes.
I had some periods where I was playing 5 and 6 times a week while working a full-time job. I'd play 2 gigs on Saturday, play at church on Sunday, a gig Sunday night, then go to work on Monday, and then probably play Tuesday night and Friday night. I mean,
exactly.
It's just not sustainable, right?
No, it's not sustainable. And you feel like a local rock star when you're doing it, and you're like, oh yeah, man, I got a gig, and you're the whole time you're like, man, your family is suffering, and it's a fine line. I'm not knocking any. I mean, I wanted to do that. It was still my decision to do it, but you start realizing, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, people realize it too late. And by that time, the damage is done. But like you said earlier, we both have been fortunate to have very supportive families.
Well, I will be very honest with you, be very frank, and tell you that there was a period where it was a little on the table for us, and Lisa and I went to counseling about it, and something the counselor said one day, I just kind of had an epiphany of, whenever you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And you better be very careful and very intentional about what you say yes and what you say no to.
Yeah.
And that, it just changed my whole perspective on things.
I totally agree, and fortunately, I've got three grandsons now, and I've got another grandchild on the way. They've made the decision not to find out what it is just yet, and he or she will be here in July, and looking forward to that. But that's one of the things. I mean, I hate that it took so long to really genuinely realize that. But that though, when I started getting into needing to get to know my grandkids, and then also getting to know my kids in an adult age better,
Yeah.
and getting to know my wife again and things like that. And then I'm fortunate that both my parents and both Judy's parents are still with us and everything. So being able to try to spend time with them when possible and everything. So you just, like you said, I mean, you get to a point and you start realizing what you need to say yes to and what you have to say no to a lot of times.
Yeah, that's really it. And just when you can figure that out, that things will be a lot clearer. At least it was for me. So remind me, you've been playing in a bluegrass band for a long time. What's the name of that band that you've been playing with?
Cedar Hill.
Cedar Hill. That's exactly right.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because the guy that I was talking about earlier in our conversation, Jim Adkins, he is that's his band, and I play mandolin and fiddle in the band. Now, when I first joined the band, I was playing fiddle because we had a mandolin player, Brad Laird, and outstanding mandolin player. And then through some family decisions and stuff, he had they moved to a point where it was not really sustainable for him to continue playing in the band, and so I jumped over and started playing mandolin. And that's one of the things, kind of going back to our earlier discussion. It wasn't like I had to learn how to play the mandolin. I already knew, so I just shifted over and started playing. And it is interesting to be able to do that. I mean, I know in some cases. I know you and I both who have done, have played church for a long time, and it's interesting that, as musical styles have changed, sometimes like the current thing will be, oh yeah, well this song's got a lot of this instrument. Like right now, banjo seems to really be prevalent in a lot of worship music. Well, if you already know how to play, if you already know how to have somebody that plays banjo, no problem. Hey, dude, I need you to start playing banjo. But what commonly happens is, okay, we've got this worship team that's 7 people or 4 people or whatever it is. Hey, we want to start doing this particular music. Well, does anybody know how to play banjo? No, I play guitar. Okay, well, we need to have a banjo sound. Okay, I'm going to go buy a banjo and I'm going to learn how to play. And that's what happens. But going back to Cedar Hill, I didn't have to do that. So I just kind of flipped over to playing more mandolin than fiddle.
Yeah. For those folks who have not heard the band, which I've heard the band and love the band, how would you describe, because you guys at the core are a bluegrass band, but you have a really fun take on material and stuff. How would you describe the band?
Well, it's probably Earl Scruggs meets Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs meets Sam Bush and John Cowan and a duck. Because Jimmy has this ability. He can have a conversation and he can sing in duck voice. Now we don't do every song that way, but we do have a select number of songs that Jimmy sings in the duck voice. And that's we actually kind of go back to the, Hot Rise, the great bluegrass band, had their alter ego, Red Knuckles and the Trailblazers. And they would come out and dress, they would dress crazy. They'd go backstage and come back out as Red Knuckles and the Trailblazers, dressed in like nudie suits or whatever, and then do this great Western swing music. Well, Cedar Hill had, actually for many years, we actually did do a little bit of a costume change. We would just do it right there in front of the audience. We'd get through with a Bill Monroe tune, and then we'd turn around and put on like wigs or whatever, and turn around, and Jimmy would have his duck hat on, and he'd start talking in a duck voice and everything, and then we would go into Elvira done in duck voice or something. I mean, it was crazy. Over the years, so the costumes have kind of gone away, and we do like rock tunes too. I mean, for the longest time we had a version of I shot the sheriff, and just like kicking it, not reggae or anything, just like really upbeat stuff. Just we do all kind of stuff.
It's funny as you're mentioning this. I'm thinking about the fact that bluegrass bands, maybe more than any other style of music I can think of, really put their sense of humor on display. I think of that. I think of Run C&W. I think of the Cleverleys. These groups.
My gosh, I love the Cleverleys.
I just think about these groups that they play these other styles of songs through the lens of what they do, and it's really funny. Look, it's funny, but it's not. There's a lot going on under the surface to make it seem effortless and funny. It requires some good playing to make it seem to pull that off, right?
Yes, I feel you feel like a drummer. Because you being a drummer as well, in addition to being an amazing bass player and playing some piano and stuff, you're a great drummer as well. And your son, Skylar's an outstanding drummer as well. And there's a lot going on if you're a drummer.
Yeah.
And when you're doing what you're talking about, and it's, it might be, it's another layer. You're playing a bluegrass tune or you're playing a rock tune done bluegrass style, but you're also trying to create like alternate voices or, when you're singing the, harmony lines and everything, and you've got one of the guys in the band singing like a duck or what. And I'm saying that because we do that, but all the bands that do stuff have got their own little niche of what they do.
Yeah.
And it brings me back to when I first started playing. There was a group called the Mayor and Buford, and it was two people. And the mayor was the main focal point. He was the mayor of Morrow, Georgia for a time, and I forgot what his name was, but he would just sit up there with his guitar, and he would tell jokes, and he would do songs. And like I said, it was the Mayor and Buford. Well, he would hire somebody to be Buford. Now, Buford was required by the mayor to sit there and take unmerciful abuse at his behest.
The straight man kind of thing, like in a comedy duo. Yeah.
Was not allowed to smile, had to look dumb as a box of rocks, but but they were always outstanding musicians, whether they were playing guitar or some other instrument. And the mayor would just abuse the crap out of them while they were, and he would abuse the audience. I mean, I watched at a Dahlonega Bluegrass Festival one time, and this lady got up to go to the bathroom, and he stopped in the middle of the song and said, "Ma'am, where are you going?" Oh my gosh. And she's like, and she keeps walking and said, "Ma'am, where are you going? I'm in the middle of a song." And she says, "I've got to go to the restroom." He said, "Okay, we'll wait." And let me tell you, he waited until she came back before he finished the song. He told jokes and stuff, but he did not finish the song until this lady came back.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'll bet the audience was like falling out of their seats.
Oh my gosh, it was hilarious. I felt bad for her, but it was hilarious.
So how long have y'all all been playing? How long has Cedar Hill been together? Because they are already playing right before you started playing with them. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So Jimmy, Jim, and then Bob and Fred McIsaac. Bob playing guitar, Fred playing bass. They're brothers. And the earliest iteration, I believe, would have been with Jeff Johnson on fiddle and Meredith Northcutt and her on fiddle. No, she was fiddle. No, before Jeff. Meredith playing fiddle, and her husband at the time, Dewey, who unfortunately passed away. And at some point, I don't remember all of the iterations, but it morphed over the years. And there was a time where there was another mandolin player named Chip Dunbar, who was just an amazing vocalist. And so, like I said, I mean, I would get it wrong if I said this was the first and second and third iterations, but there were just a lot of that during that first time when I first started playing. When I'm 14, they already had a very established band, and and they were playing. They were like one of the main bands at every bluegrass festival, around, especially around Georgia, but even some southeast stuff and everything. And that was the band started in 1976, and I started playing in, I guess, 80. I think I started playing in 80. I guess let's say I'm 58 now, so 44 years ago. So whatever that.
Okay.
So, anyway, so that I didn't start playing with the band obviously then. I mean, that the band's been around that long, since 1976. I think we determined I've been playing in the band for maybe 25 years now, maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
Something like that.
Wow. That's a long time. And you guys, it's been, I think one of the players passed away a few years ago.
Yes. Well, actually, over the, there's been a couple, Chip, the mandolin player that I mentioned earlier, many years ago. And I don't remember when it was that he passed away, but we had a reunion, a Cedar Hill reunion, where all the past living members had came, and we did a big show at the Red Light Cafe in Atlanta. And Chip and his wife went back to California, and I think it was the following week or the week after he had a heart attack and passed away.
Really?
But the one that the guy that you're mentioning was the most recent. Jerry Zolnowski, affectionately known as Jerry Z.
Yes.
And he was a bass player, great singer and everything, and passed away a couple of years back. And it can hit us pretty good. I mean, it's or pretty bad per se. We were just having a lot of fun and everything. And when we lost Jerry, it was just the whole band has now taken a little bit of a different turn. I mean, we're still doing a lot of the same stuff, but we now have Scott Glazer playing with us, and Scott's an amazing bass player and a great singer and everything. And so we're doing the band. That was one of the things when Jerry passed away. We collectively decided Jerry would not want the band to end just because he was not with us anymore. So we said we got to find the right person, and Scott has fallen right into the pocket, and we're just still playing. And of course, as we've gotten older, we don't play near as much but as we used to. But when I first joined the band, I thought I was playing with a touring rock band, because we had this massive sound system, and we were playing 2 and 3 gigs every weekend, and it was just crazy. But that's two or three gigs every month.
Yeah. That's okay. That's all right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think, and you can certainly fill in some blanks if you want, but I'd love to get to the point in the conversation where you meet our pal, Mr. Steve Ward, and y'all start playing some music together. The infamous night at Houck's with the black cowboy hat.
Yes.
When you came and played and knocked his socks off, and he's wanted to play with you ever since.
Yeah, my longtime friend Tony Duck was playing with Steve in the band as he was kind of the utility player. I think he played of course fiddle, and he played some electric guitar and some acoustic, and played He's outstanding fiddle player, outstanding mandolin player, and really an outstanding guitar player. Everything he picks up. His dad Carl was a great banjo player, and Tony technically plays banjo, but you can't get him to play. He likes to play his mandolin and his fiddle now. But he was playing in the band, and I don't remember all of the fine details of how things kind of morphed in. But I know that there was a that gig at Houck's was for some sort of special event, and Tony called me and said, "Look, I cannot do this gig, and I need to get somebody to fill in. Is it something you're interested in?" And at this time, it was during the time that I was actively trying to leave corporate life and get into playing music full time. So I told Tony, I said, "Man, I'd love to do that. Can you, kind of hook me up and, let me know what I need to do and everything." And he talked to Steve, and if I remember correctly, Steve mailed me, or either I met him or something. I had like an envelope, and it had like 10 CDs and a set list, what keys we did the songs in, and everything. And I buried myself in a room and just started learning the tunes, and wound up doing that gig. And it's a country band, so I had my black hat, and I show up, and I am sure it was probably quite comical, but I was, my friend Buddy Ashmore had given me that hat, and it's this really nice felt style cowboy hat and everything. But I'll get off the hat business here for a second. But anyway, so that was the first official gig, and it was basically, like I said, just filling in for Tony.
Yeah.
And I don't remember all the fine details, but over a period of several weeks or whatever, or maybe a few months or something, then it ultimately wound up being a more permanent thing.
Yeah. Well, as someone who has received one of the Steve Ward song lists in my lifetime, I know that when you see it, you're like, holy moly, this is a lot of material. I need to get busy. Because the dude is a walking jukebox and knows a whole lot of songs.
It is amazing. And that list has grown considerably since that first list he gave.
Wow. Yep. Do you remember who all was in that band when you started playing?
I should know. I hate that I don't remember all the people's name. I remember a guy named Sean was a drummer, and can't remember the keyboard player was really good, cool guy. And bass player's name was Danny, but I don't remember his last name. He was an IT guy at a company. And, Corey Jean Anderson was singing as the co-front with Steve. Dennis Ellerby, my good friend, Dennis, playing pedal steel guitar. Me and him and Tony go way back, and me and Dennis have known each other for years and years and years.
So when you and I were at the same place with each other, we alluded to this earlier, I had gotten hired for a pickup thing. I believe it was the singer named Ross Copley. He was a singer at Wild Bill's when it was open. Wild Bill's in Atlanta. And it was me, Jimmy Mouton was playing drums, Chris Blackwell was playing guitar, Bobby Mobley was playing keyboard, and Ross was singing.
Right.
And I don't even know I can't even remember if we rehearsed for that, but it was a good little band. I do remember that. And we came and played, I think it was a fundraising event, if I'm not mistaken.
It was.
And you guys were on that gig too.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what window of time that would have been.
Good grief, I don't even remember, man.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah. The rest of the world has gotten old, but thankfully we haven't. So
I know. I'm thankful that I'm just as young as I've ever been.
Yeah. Then somewhere along the way, you and I started playing together, and we've played a bunch of gigs together. We've done all kinds of cool things, club gigs, a lot of country club gigs, weddings, stuff in Atlanta, stuff out of town. We've played all kinds of stuff. And there are a few gigs that really come to my mind that you and I have had the opportunity to do together, and I'm sure the few I'm alluding to here.
I am sure I do.
Tell me about your.
Well, I was going to say that you and I are both 1 degree of Kevin Bacon.
That's right. We are 1 degree of Kevin Bacon,
and I have a picture to prove it.
That's it. So we got hired. I've known, and I think Steve may have known them too, but I used to play a lot for RCS Productions back in the day, and that was back when Ron Simpson was still running it. Then it was taken over he retired, Stephen Moore took over, and we got a lot of work through Stephen, who's a dear, dear friend. I love him to death.
Yeah, I saw Stephen last year at an event.
Really?
Yep.
So RCS Productions, for those folks who do not know, they are a production company. They provide live sound, lighting, and they book entertainment. But one of their big things is they work with all of these larger venues in cities, municipalities, like a city of Woodstock amphitheater, a city of Peachtree City, Fayetteville, all these different amphitheaters. They book the talent and then provide all the production for it.
Right.
So Stephen reached out and said, would you guys like to open for the Bacon Brothers? We're like, yeah, heck yeah, let's do it. So that was at the Fred, right? At the Frederick Brown Amphitheater.
Exactly.
And it was me, you, and Steve, and Skylar played drums.
I know. And I came across a picture yesterday preparing for this discussion. I came across a picture of Skylar behind the kit.
That for a multitude of reasons, of course, getting to play on stage with him, getting to play on stage with y'all, getting to hang out with, Ren McCormick from Footloose, was pretty cool. But I think that was one of my favorite sets of music that I've ever gotten the chance to play. It was so much fun that night. We were just,
and
it
we
just,
covered
it
a lot
worked.
of stuff.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time.
Yeah, it was good, man. You guys, everybody, you were cooking. You sounded so good. And I remember Andrew Strayhorn, who went to
Yes.
Wesleyan. He was your tech that night, and he helped you do the instrument changes, kind of helped stagehand, and that was so much fun. One of my other memories is that, we got there while they were already doing their sound check, and I'm standing over on the side of the stage, and they finish, and Kevin Bacon takes his guitar off and walks over and puts his hand out and goes, "Hey, man, I'm Kev." And I'm sitting here thinking, dude, I know who you are. and you know that I know who you are.
Right, exactly.
But they were so nice. They were so cool.
Oh, they were outstanding. I mean, it was him and his brother Michael, man. And the whole band. They were absolutely amazing to just hang out with, and not that we hung out with them for hours or anything, but just being around them for a few minutes. Like when they're doing sound check, and then in the green room, they're on one end and we're on the other, and they were just cool to hang out with.
Yeah, they were really nice. They're a tight little core group of musicians that they always take those same players out with them when they go on tour, and that was fun.
Right.
Now, that said, that is still not my favorite memory from the Frederick Brown Amphitheater in Peachtree City. The other one is also with David Ellis, and that's one that I'll as I'm looking at my life, that night is one of those I'll always remember.
Well, your wife, Lisa, took some great video that showed how meaningful the music, of course, but we were there to celebrate Frederick Brown Jr. and honor him because he had just passed away earlier in the year. And that's, the namesake of that amphitheater. And it turned out, to sidebar for a second, turned out, and something that I should have known years and years and years ago, but my good friend Mike Fleming married Fred's daughter, Sally. And I didn't realize the connection until I looked over, and Mike is over there motioning, wanting to know, "Hey, man, what are you doing here?" And then I come over and talk, and I'm like, "Yeah, we were doing this thing." He says, "That's my father-in-law."
Wow.
But
yeah, so Stephen Moore reached out to me and said they are wanting to do a tribute, but there was an opening act. Who was the headliner? Was it
38 Special?
Is that who it was? I could not remember who the headliner was. So it's 38 Special. And between, they were going to do a dedication, like a memorial celebration for Mr. Brown. And he said, "Would you come and sing? They want In My Life by the Beatles." And so you and I wound up going down and doing it, had a little quick sound check, and then just hung out. We got to hang out and just spend some time together.
And all the years that we played together and all the gigs we didn't really get to hang out on a regular basis. Yeah. It was usually you showed up for the gig, you showed up early enough to load in, maybe grab a bite to eat, do the gig, tear down, maybe say some pleasantries, and then we're off to see the wizard, basically. I mean, you're just in and out, in and out, in and out. Every once in a while we got to hang out. But for that particular day, we got to really just chill.
Yeah, and it was, like I said, it's one of those memories I'll have. The music was cool. That was fun. But just the fellowship with you was the highlight of that day for me. It really was.
Well, and I appreciate that. And you did it, man. You killed it. You knocked it out of the park. And then, like I said, Lisa took some great video, and, she's panning from one side of the stage to the opposite side of the stage, and you're seeing the audience, and everybody's got their lights on their phone, doing the whole audience is just lit up, and that song is man. There's so many facets of that song that as you get older, you really start really digging into and kind of leaning into as an adult, and start looking at your past life and just everything. It was really meaningful.
Yeah, well, and look, you sounded fantastic and just came and just nailed it, and it was a weird thing to walk on stage and just immediately have to do it, while after the audience had just been listening to a full band. We just came out and it was just the two of us.
Right.
And
Wasn't that like an Allman Brothers tribute or something?
It may have been, yeah, it was
I think it was Allman Brothers tribute band, and they nailed it, man. They were on. And then we did our thing, and then 38 Special came out afterwards.
Yeah. I think that, I can't remember how many people that venue holds, but it's a pretty big space, and it was packed.
It was packed.
And that was really cool. So I will I'll cherish that one for a long time. So I wanted to ask you about what you're doing now, because I know you've as of late have started this really cool band project that we were just talking about before we started recording. You're playing with some great musicians, and you guys are staying pretty busy.
Yeah, it's I've got my main things right now. I got to make sure I put in my time with or bring light to what I do with Mark Miller first, real quick. And Mark is an outstanding singer songwriter and has gotten a lot of accolades over a recent project that's more roots music oriented. So I play mandolin and banjo with him, and then we expand out and do full band stuff. We have our good friend Jeff Taylor, that was formerly from the Time Jumpers, come down and play keyboards and accordion. Outstanding accordion player, plays penny whistle and everything. Drew Lawson on bass, and depending on the venue, we'll either have a drummer or we may just do it just as a 4-piece. But and then working with Mark as he's leading worship at church here in Atlanta currently, and doing winery gigs and just a bunch of stuff. But it's been really cool working with him. And one of the cool things about working with Mark is he is a true vocalist. He absolutely will only do the song in the key that is good for the voice. So me on mandolin playing a kicking song in the key of F sharp is or A flat is not always easy, but it's always challenging. But I have learned a tremendous amount about navigating on the mandolin, and it's also helped my fiddle playing as well, because of the tuning and everything. But anyway, I just want to make sure I got that in. But the band you're referring to is Ethel's Envy, and it started off as a trio with me and our mutual friend Art McNaughton on drums and Paul Arredondo on bass. And then we added Valerie Waters on keyboard.
Oh, she's great.
Valerie's amazing. And the name we played off of her. She had an Aunt Ethel, and her Aunt Ethel was like one of her big champions as from her musical upbringing and everything. She was always supportive and everything. So we kind of tried to pay homage to Aunt Ethel, and created that name, and it's kind of an Americana band. I mean, we do country, we do rock, do a little bit of bluegrass, just some R&B stuff occasionally, some old, maybe like Motown sort of standards and stuff like that. I mean, we just do a bunch of stuff. It's just kind of look at the audience and say, okay, I think the audience is digging this vibe, and we'll do that. And, I play a lot of acoustic guitar, get to play some electric occasionally, and the guys are after me to try to figure out a way of working banjo into this band too. So I'm still working on that.
Yeah. Some work in the bodybuilding and the banjo, if you don't mind.
That's right. Bodybuilding banjo by Dave.
By Dave, you could you could bench press the banjo above your head.
I'm going to bench press 17 banjos.
That's it. Yep. Not 18. But
not
17.
17 5 strings and a tenor.
That's it. That's exactly it. That's great. I'm trying to think of how I want to ask this question. How, from the time you really were gigging a lot to now, and then a lot has changed in the world, and then we had COVID in the middle of that, and now we're back. How is the live music landscape? How do you think it's changed since you started playing? And let's look at it from the secular world, playing club gigs, private gigs, all that, and playing at churches. How do you think if you can describe that, how would you think all of that's changed?
I think, like when I first started playing, like I mean, in a teen, I was doing most everything was like bluegrass festival, and it's weird. The bluegrass festival scene has even changed tremendously because while there are still lots of localized festivals that basically attract just a few hundred people, there's so much of a pivot to the large festivals like a Merle Fest or a Telluride or something like that. And then back then when I first started playing, I was doing like the Marietta Bluegrass Festival and stuff. And then at the same time, I wasn't playing in church so much back then because I was just learning how to play. But then as I kind of got older, and then when I very first started doing it full time and playing with Steve Ward, we were doing like the bar scene. Almost every gig was you were either playing like 9 to 1, 10 to 2, something like that. You're getting home at 4 a.m. And then maybe like in my case, when I first started playing with him, I was getting home and then having to go to a job, an office job. And fortunately, over the years, a lot of bar and restaurant gigs have become now like a 6 to 9, 7 to 10 sort of thing. And I'm sure there's money saving, but budgeting from the business standpoint, trying to do more business in less time or something instead of trying to stay open all hours of the night. So that part has changed pretty dramatically. But I also think that back many years ago, it was, if you were going to go see live music, it was only a Friday or a Saturday night in a lot of cases. Whereas now, you might go to the local Latin restaurant and hear music on Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. I mean, you never know.
Yeah.
Or a barbecue place, and they might have Thursday night singer-songwriter night and Friday night and Saturday night band. So I think that's changed a good bit as well.
I also think that when technology allowed you to hang a TV on the wall,
yes,
musicians suddenly had to compete against sporting events.
Yes.
And the sports bar, everything. You can go to a nice restaurant and there's still a TV hanging on the wall in the restaurant, and they have a basketball or a football game on, and the band is always competing with the sporting event. And,
right.
I'm just going to be honest, it's kind of frustrating.
Well, I find that I almost, when you walk in, and whether the place has an actual bandstand or if it's where they've moved 2 booths out of the way to make room.
Right. Right.
You almost want the TV screen to be right above the bandstand, because otherwise the audience doesn't even look in your direction.
Yep, that's it. Yep.
So, and then if they're playing, if the NCAA tournament's on, or if it's a Monday night football or whatever the situation is, and there's like a big play going on, you get the audience applause, and you just basically have to be self-gratifying and say, well, they're clapping for us.
Yeah, that's it.
They're screaming for us.
I started doing, whenever they do that, I'll just yell thank you on the microphone. So start doing that. It's fun. It's kind of it lets you in on the joke of it, and just be like, yeah, it's fine. I know what's going on here. It's all right. It's great.
My gosh.
Well, David Ellis, I can't even overstate how much I love you, and just am just thankful that you and that our paths crossed years ago, and that we've managed to play a lot of music together and hang out and laugh a whole lot. And
my gosh, laugh at each other, laugh at other people.
That's it.
Laugh at scenarios happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just, my life changed for the better when I got to meet and hang out with you. And
and likewise.
Yeah, and I have so much respect for your musicianship, your ability, and just the way you just the energy and the vibe you bring to every situation you're playing in. It's really cool and really inspiring to be with you, man.
Well,
So,
I appreciate that, and feeling is mutual. I mean, I think I often tell people when they start, and everybody likes to be needs compliments and needs to be encouraged and everything, but I find myself not really knowing what to say when somebody comes up and says, "Man, you're an amazing banjo player. Man, you're an amazing fiddle player," or whatever it is. So what I find myself doing is I think this is where I feel most blessed in being, I guess I feel most blessed in my musicianship rather than the ability to play all of these instruments and sing a harmony part or whatever at the same time. Because what I can tell them when they're complimenting me is I can't do what I do without having a solid rhythm section, without having amazing musicians holding it down while
yeah,
I'm doing what I do.
yeah,
Because for me to just get up there and just play some ripping banjo break or something means very little. But when you put it in context with the rhythm and where the vocal line lays and the dynamics and everything, that is where it gets really important.
yeah. That's it. No, that's exactly it. Yeah, I would say the success of the way where I view my success as a musician are the people that I've been lucky enough to play with, and
Yeah.
that's
And it
it.
may be that you're playing with them currently, or maybe you have had an opportunity to play with them and learn from them. The great Chick Corea. If you've ever read his book, one of the things that he points out in there is, it's just about, everything is about, it's an experience. You're playing with this musician and you're learning from them about dynamics. You're learning from them about melody. You're learning about, what can I do? Where can I take some chances? Or where do I need to kind of stay solid and maybe not go too far off the map and everything? But just his whole thought process was about it being basically a living organism. Whenever the music starts, you're in it and the roadmap, but there's a lot of give and take, and that give and take is with the music itself, and a lot of times, in most cases, it's give and take between the band members.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, it is. It is a living organism. That's a perfect way to describe it. You have a bunch of people with pulses and heartbeats and emotions, and finding that middle ground with everyone. That's it's pretty magical that people can agree on that musical thing that happens. And
Right.
I was just saying that to someone a few days ago. It's like we live in a world now that unfortunately people just don't seem to agree about anything anymore.
Right.
But thank goodness there's music, because that is like it is the one thing that we can all seem to find some middle ground on,
Totally agree. And it kind of goes back to very early in our conversation. You were talking about, communication and everything. And that is one form that we still have, that we can communicate. And in most cases, unfortunately not all, but in most cases, you can communicate as musicians, and you can tell, if I'm playing and I've had a crap day, you as a bass player, you can hear it in my mandolin playing if I've had a crap day.
Yeah.
But you can also help support me musically until you and I get a chance to step off stage and find out what's going on.
Yeah, that's it.
And the same thing applies to you or the vocalist or whoever. It is a way of communicating, and it's I hope and pray that never goes away. With all the disagreement that everybody has about absolutely everything, I hope that musical communication, support, and everything continues to stay.
Yeah, that's it. I agree completely. Well, David, thank you, buddy. I think we covered everything that I wanted to talk about. That's for sure. Is there anything you want to talk about before we go?
No, I mean, I think we're in good shape right now. We'll let this be part A of the conversation.
That's it.
Because I am certain, as many notes as I took, that's one page. That was 2 pages of about 5 pages that I just showed you. we can do a whole nother conversation on just the music, just the who every band we were following and we still follow and all that. We can get into we'll do a part B sometime.
Yes, that's perfect.
But I really appreciate you taking time to let us have some discussion about all this. It's
man,
something I've been looking forward to.
Yeah, me too. It's been amazing. Well, folks, go check out David Ellis and all of his projects with Mark Miller and with Ethel's Envy and just everywhere he's played. Cedar Hill. Just check him out. He is. You will not be disappointed. I promise. You will. You will enjoy everything he does and how he does it. So,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for listening to the Bandwich Tapes. I'm your host, Brad Williams. The show's theme is called Placation and was written by Mark Mundy. Drop me a line at the email address, thebandwichtapes@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe to receive new episodes of the podcast. And while you're at it, please tell someone else about the show. Thanks for listening.